Hey YouTube, it's Serpentine. Welcome back to my channel. Today we are here to talk about the full moon in Krittika, Aries, which happened on November 15th, but this reading is going to be taking us through the energies of that full moon and the waning moon period, which goes all the way until December 1st. So stay tuned for all the tea. Full moon in Krittika, Aries, direct your creative fire to restore balance. A time to focus on the light within to help you emerge from a challenge or crisis of faith and embark on a new journey. Reconnect to your higher purpose as a light worker and aim your efforts in that direction to make tangible progress. A release of heavy baggage can restore balance in relationships. Be open to expressing yourself creatively in new ways. You are protected. I'm just going to quickly go over to the observatory before we get into it with the cards. We can see a little bit of what the chart has to say. As you can see, this full moon was in 29 degrees Aries. Now, flashback to October, we had a full moon in 0 degrees Aries in Ashwini, Gandanta zone. So it's kind of like we've had a double Aries activation here, where it's like we know that we're at the precipice of this new beginning, but it's just kind of taken a little while to kind of get off the ground. It's like it's this feeling of being in between worlds, the ending of an ending and the beginning of a beginning kind of thing. And with Krittika, this has to do with the creative fire, because Krittika Nakshatra is ruled by Agni, the god of fire, and so it has a lot to do with the fire of your will to be able to metabolize your experiences and purify your experiences and be able to then direct your energy into the appropriate direction to get things going. This is why it's a bit harsh, because it can feel very cutting when you realize, like, when you have a bit of like the reality check that we've all had, and now we have to kind of reorient our lives, you know, in the context of that. And I think that we needed to have that clarity come through in between the first full moon in Aries and now to truly be able to move forward, because there was still a lot that was uncertain and unknown as to like what the trajectory was on a macro level when we had that first full moon in Ashwini. But now that we're here, it's like time to be really discerning about what is the appropriate place to channel your energies. Like for the underlying energy for this spread that I pulled for the blurb was the 7 of Cups, which has a lot to do with like cutting out the distractions and really identifying what the most important thing is for you to be focusing on, and to not split your energy and attention between too many disparate things, because that can sometimes lead you into unnecessary fragmentation or stagnation and stuff like that. And I was kind of talking about that earlier because I'm facing that dilemma a little bit, where it's like there are so many things I want to work on that I think are important, but I know that I really need to like prioritize certain things that are going to be the thing that like I'm meant to be doing right now, creatively and materially at this time. But ultimately, the impulse is to restore balance, because we are still in the context of this Libra season that we've been in terms of like the Libra, Swati Libra new moon, and like how can we use this fire to carve out greater independence in our lives, like a greater sense of sovereignty and autonomy. And a great example of that is the incident in New Zealand with the woman, the Maori woman MP who stood up and did the haka.
The house is suspended until the ringing of the bells. The gallery is to be cleared.
That's like a really great encapsulation of what this Krittika energy is, because it's that fire, that divine rage channeling through a very cutting display. Like she literally ripped the paper in half like she was cutting it, you know? Krittika is cutting, it's symbolized by the knife. Yeah, Sydney. Sydney says that video has been fueling me. It's so true, because I think that the video really speaks to something that we all feel inside, which is this like rage at the system. But it's really the indigenous people who have the most effective technologies to be able to deal with that rage in a healthy way, in such things as the haka and stuff like that. Like these are spiritual technologies of movement and of expression that allows for that divine rage to be processed and expressed in a way that is productive and transformational. And I think that that's why a lot of people were like really moved by that, because a lot of us have been disconnected from our indigenous traditions that we have lost in due to being, you know, colonized or colonizers, which again, you can't really be a colonizer without also having kind of been colonized in a way. It's a powerful moment because it shows people that we are all in this together as one human family, like independent of what your background is. Like you can feel that truth behind that. And I also saw someone on TikTok talking about how the way to get out of this timeline would be to do the movements from the OA. And honestly, like I saw that before the whole haka thing even happened. And I really do feel like the haka is kind of the answer to that impulse. Like the movements in the OA served a very similar purpose of being a vehicle through which the characters could channel, you know, their emotions and use that as fuel to transport them to a different timeline. And I think that that's not dissimilar from what that woman was doing on the floor of the New Zealand Parliament, because like it's ultimately in protest of something that would be stripping away their sovereignty and their rights. And again, this all goes back to that theme of Swati, where it's like, you know, the desire that we have to carve out our own destiny and be independent from certain, you know, status quo that we are wanting to individuate from through following our hearts and stuff like that. It's a very important example right now because, you know, even though we're in a time of intense shadow material that is being revealed, it also is an opportunity for us to be beacons of light and truth. And I see that as an example of that. I see that haka as a ancient technology by which people can use it to fight the demons. Like that's why they have those, you know, intense expressions of like the sampaku eyes and all of that kind of thing, and the tongue coming out for the men who do that specific movement in the haka with the tongue coming out. It's very reminiscent of Kali, and how that display of Kali with her tongue out is very much about like destroying the demons and stuff like that. So there's a lot to learn, I think, from that. And simultaneously, there was also a world's largest haka demonstration. Randomly, Conan O'Brien was there and learned the movements also. the timing of this eruption of indigenous solidarity in the contrast of what just happened with the election, these two things are directly related, because you can't have, like, the more shadow material that gets exposed, the more light that is coming out that then exposes the shadow material, and it's like a whole cycle or whatever. So it's important that in these times where we might be feeling a bit discouraged by, things in our life or these collective developments, that we remember that it's in these times of deep shadow revelation that it is on us to show up and really embody the light within. And that's all of what Krittika is about, because it is in many ways talking about the divine flame, in terms of like, the fire element and stuff like that. So always good to keep that in mind. But now let's get some cards out for this full moon, waning moon period. We're going to do my usual spread of awareness. So what do we most need to become aware of? Integration. How do we best integrate that? Choice. What's the highest choice available to us in this time frame? And result. What is the highest result? As well as some cards for the underlying energy, and then some bonus oracles to kind of give us a greater picture of what we're dealing with. For awareness, we have actually one of the cards that came up for the big spread, so it's like a repeater a little bit. For awareness, we have the Star in reverse, and this is talking about, like, okay, we might be feeling a little bit down in the dumps about recent events that have happened, either personally and or collectively. And it's dredging up a lot in terms of like what we need to be working through alchemically to transmute that into fuel for the rebirth vibes. And so it's just going to be important that you do your best to keep the faith and really reconnect to those things that inspire you. I think that this is going to be a really important time to really reflect on the spark within and really tend to that, and really be in your spiritual practices of like meditation or, breath work, whatever it is that can help you to kind of get some of that shadow material or lower vibrational energy moving out a bit, so that you can then recycle that into something a bit more productive for yourself, either relationally or in terms of your creative projects, or in terms of maybe even just like decluttering and stuff like that. Because again, Krittika has to do with cutting. So it's really a star of purification in many ways. So it's kind of like, okay, we need to purify our field in some fashion in order for us to really be in a position to channel our energies appropriately and be able to restore balance to our experience. And it's really just going to be about being honest with yourself about where you're at, and, let yourself feel the feels. Just because you're feeling down doesn't mean that it has to stay that way, but it does have to kind of get out of your system. So, but at the same time, like, don't let yourself get too down in the dumps like Debbie Downer or whatever, because this is temporary, and this is really about, setting us up to be agents of, powerful change in the context of where we're moving right now. And I say that especially because as the underlying energy, we have Ace of Wands, which again is that like divine spark vibe that I was talking about. So it's like there is an impulse of this inspiration or divine spark or new fresh ideas or new beginnings that have been brewing for a little while that you want to like have take off. But it's like we have to kind of work through some of the drudge that's being drudged up in order for that to really start to gain some momentum and not like burn out, right? So it's like, what are the things that you are sacrificing into your fire right now is going to be important to ask yourself, because it's about, like there's a whole ritual in Hinduism around like feeding the fire as Agni, and like, giving something to the fire as a sacrifice for the gods to make it sacred, right? So this is going to be a great time to cut out distractions and really identify what is the most sacred to you, and really maybe even invite some sort of ritual around that to help you reorient to, you know, what it is that you are prioritizing in this new chapter that's beginning right now. Because again, this is an Aries Krittika full moon, so the emphasis really is on like that spark that's going to create the flame that you're going to be, you know, riding through the whole cycle with. But yeah, keep hope alive though, because I think a lot of people are catastrophizing right now, and while I think it's important to be real about the severity of what's going on, and like in the same way that, you know, I've been very real about like my own situation, at the same time, we can't let that keep us from showing up for, you know, the boss battle, so to speak. For integration, we have Page of Pentacles in reverse. So I think this is one of those times where like you may want to consider assessing like what it is that you need on a base level, on your foundational level, to really have a successful jumping off point here, because it may be that there's a focus on kind of what you don't have, or like loss or lack, or feeling like you missed an opportunity. But in reality, I think it's really about coming into the understanding around what it is that you most need right now, like the bare essentials, to kind of like reground yourself after kind of the destabilization that you might be feeling around, you know, the recent events that you've been going through, at least since like the new moon, or even the past full moon from last month. And so it's really about, I think, just getting clear on like your priorities on a kind of short-term basic level, so that you don't run the risk of like having your energies be directed into the wrong direction, right? So it's about really cultivating that heart discernment, I think, because again, this is in the integration area, which has a lot to do with the heart chakra. And with Stevie Nicks on here, you know, this talks a lot about too, like the way in which that you're expressing yourself. So there's always going to be an invitation here, I think, in terms of like assessing how you are saying things before you say them. Because I think with Krittika, it can sometimes be where like you're saying something true, but it can come across as very cutting, because it's like the word Krittika eventually kind of became the word critical or critic, right? It's like the same etymology, root word. So it's like good to have discernment, but it's also good to be aware of like when is the right time to say something cutting and harsh. Like if someone's already kind of in this zone of hopelessness, like do you really want to be out there like slicing and dicing people down in a way that's not going to actually be serving them? Like it's really about like choosing your battles a little bit in terms of what you're saying to people and when. And sometimes it's good to hold back until you've processed things fully, so that when you go and say something or express yourself, you have done so from a place of having integrated what you've been through, versus jumping the gun and kind of speaking too off the cuff and then having a little bit of blowback from that that's like unnecessary, especially in terms of like relationship stuff. Like if you're focusing on trying to balance out a relationship right now, you know, and this can be one of those times where like this is sort of a bad example, but it's like fights can happen over like the stupid shit because you're not actually addressing like the real deeper issue. And it's like, do you want to focus on that, or do you want to focus on like the real deeper issue kind of vibe? At least in terms of, you know, how this can manifest in terms of relationships and stuff. Your mileage may vary. And then for choice, we have 7 of Pentacles with Saturn coming up here as well, large and in charge here on this card. This is a card of, you know, like focusing on choosing the things that you know are going to, that you've already kind of invested like time and energy into, and continuing to show up for the discipline and the consistency of that for the long term is my feeling. Even though you might be feeling a lot of pressure around being able to have that harvest really come through in this time. It's just going to be important to make sure that you are being wise about how you are investing that energy so that you are not burning out and just staying the course, even though it might feel like you're in a bit of a gauntlet. I do feel that, you know, there will be progress. It's not necessarily going to be linear or in the way that you necessarily, like, your ego may want, because I think a lot of what this time is focusing on is purifying yourself to be in a position to be in whatever you're in for the long haul. And that can sometimes make it more difficult in the beginning, simply because you're having to kind of like prune things away while you're getting started. Whereas like once you get the momentum going, you're just kind of going, if that makes any sense. And for a result, we have 9 of Wands in reverse. So like, this is definitely going to be a time of like, don't let like feelings of hopelessness drive you to a point where you feel like you want to give up. I think this is a time of kind of power struggles, and it's going to be on us to show up in our spiritual power and fight against the demons of, you know, doubt, the demons of fear, the demons of, you know, feeling threatened by external stimuli and forces that do pose a legitimate threat to a lot of people. But at the same time, you know, we can't let that reality hold us back. Like, I've been seeing some TikToks around people who are talking about like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, don't comply. What is it? Like, kind of like when you edit yourself in advance because you expect that you're going to be censored, kind of thing, where it's like, don't like capitulate to what you think they want from you before they even say that. You know what? It's kind of like, this is about kind of like the mind games and the power plays a little bit of like, you know, us versus the shadow revelation, and how we can't let our dismay at the situation let us be our, like, the architect of our own demise, so to speak. So there's that. But don't necessarily think that just because you're coming up against some resistance in the beginning here that it's not worth your time in the long run, because I don't really agree with that. I think that this is just part of the release of the heavy baggage that's necessary in order for us to move forward, which I sort of talk about here in the blurb. We also have some bonus cards, the oracles. From my animal deck, I was guided to pull 2. The first one is Black Egg, which is perfect because this is the throat chakra, and Krittika is associated with the throat chakra as well as the solar plexus. Aries is solar plexus, and Krittika is the cosmic throat chakra. So we can definitely see that at play here with what we just witnessed with the Maori woman doing the haka and like her kind of battle cry. I think that we are all being asked to find a way to channel our feelings of grief and despair and divine rage, you know, that's coming up for us right now collectively, into something creative and practical. And so I would really just encourage people to consider the ways in which they can use their throat to speak truth, self-expression, creativity, etc. It's definitely, I think, supported in this time, even though it's a lot of intensity in this time. And then Dragonfly appeared as well, which I tend to associate with kind of sudden plot twists and stuff like that. So even if things feel really dire, you never really know how things can suddenly change on a dime. And a lot of times it happens because you've had the courage to speak up and say something, and that can cause a chain reaction that you know, can lead to miraculous shifts, like 180s and stuff like that. So there's definitely a vibe of like, like for me personally, a recurring theme I deal with is that I am pushed to the absolute limit of what I can handle. And at the absolute last possible second, everything turns around for me. Like every single time though. And it's like so agitating because every time I'm there at the last possible second, I'm like, it's all lost. Like everything's for nothing. Like I'm not going to get my miracle. And then it happens, you know? And so I kind of feel like we really have to be getting into that consciousness right now collectively around being able to go to the last possible second and then turn things around magically, because that's kind of where we're at with like climate change, fascism, etc. You know, we have to really believe that the last second course correction can still happen. And part of that is like by affirming in ourselves through our expression of what we are being led to do, to really commit to that and keep going, even if we feel like, you know, we're facing defeat or that all is lost, because that's really not the case. It's just that it looks like that right now. So there's that. Sedna, infinite supply. You are supplied for today and all of your tomorrows. So this also has like the cetacean whale imagery in this. So this is a time to, and I also have relief coming in here. So if you've been feeling the crunch kind of like on a material level, this is a sign that even if things look dire right now, like you will be experiencing some sort of relief that will allow you to have some breathing room as you move forward on this new chapter. And I do think that if you are focusing on your abundance flow, we have the water element popping up here, which has a lot to do with the sacral chakra and your ability to manifest money and stuff like that. So this would be a great time to lean into the water element in order to kind of balance out some of that fire, you know, like and like taking hot baths and stuff like that. We also have Mars in Cancer right now, which is the ruler of Aries, and so there is definitely a lot going on in the emotional body, and it's going to be important to really make regulating your emotional body a priority so that you don't get easily derailed by, you know, your reactions to things, which are still very valid, but it's about how are you channeling that, right? And so like taking like hot baths and staying hydrated, it's going to be important because this fiery energy can, like, you know, if it gets too much, it can like dehydrate you or kind of make you like hangry or something like that. And it's just good to maintain that balance, because again, it's all about how you're directing this energy to restore balance to your life. And from my archetype deck, we have Detective in reverse. And this has to do with the shadow attribute, voyeurism, falsifying information. So this is actually one of the special archetypes that came up. I called it Spy for my program, the Earth Guardian Quest. So if you read that divination on there for the Spy section, this is especially, if you resonate with that, this is especially for you, where it's like, on the one hand, collectively, we may be dealing with, you know, people who are weaponizing information to try and promote their own agenda. So again, with Krittika, have discernment. Be aware that there are people who are trying to manipulate you, and just really cultivate that discernment through engaging in the shadow work that's coming up for you. Very important. Then with voyeurism, this is one of those things where it's like, if you're already feeling like hopeless and depressed, like maybe make it a priority to stop doom scrolling and channel that energy into something a bit more productive, or zen, so to speak. Like, it's good to want to have information. Like the light attributes of this says great powers of observation and intuition, desire to seek out the truth. But at a certain point, it can be a bit overkill if we are constantly inculcating our stuff with information and we start to let ourselves get a bit ungrounded by that. I see some people going off into, you know, blue and on territory, and I don't believe that Trump like did this ethically. Like, I do think that there was election interference, but I don't really think that at this point, I mean, look, we do have the dragonfly, so things can change, but like, I don't really have a lot of faith in our institutions to really defend the system from that, given the fact that we had the year 2000 happen. It's not like we haven't had a stolen election before, and, you know, Bush still was president, and all that stuff. So like, and that was back when things were like more normal, so to speak. So I'm not really convinced that like going down those rabbit holes is productive right now. Although, you know, it's just about like checking in with yourself and really being intentional around how you're engaging with your pursuit of information and where you're sourcing that from, and just being careful that you're not getting sucked down into too much doom scrolling right now, or going down rabbit holes that you don't need to be going down because they're not relevant to what you need to be doing right now. So just like, you know, be aware of that. And then lastly, we have conscious connections. So this is a card where, you know, again, the relationship balance was coming in with all of this. Again, Libra has to do with relationships inherently due to Venus, and we are still within that cycle of the Libra new moon. So this is definitely a time where there can be healing happening in the context of relationships due to your own commitment to purifying yourself, and then being able to purify any kind of shadow material that's happening in the context of a relationship. But you just want to be aware that this is like going to be on a case-by-case basis, and just understand that like it's up to you to decide like what you want to have in your experience and not have in your experience. And if there are relationships that are being severed right now, it's because there are new relationships that want to be coming in. So you might be saying goodbye to certain relationships due to like the cutting nature of Krittika, but you could also be healing old relationships or welcoming in new ones in turn. Especially because we have Mercury retrograde going on starting next week, but we're already in the shadow period. This could definitely be talking about, you know, healing some past wounds for sure, with regards to all of this. But again, your mileage will vary depending on kind of like where you're at right now. But because this card came up, and because the balanced relationships came up in the spread for the blurb and everything, I do think that relationships will be taking a center stage for a lot of people during this waning moon period. We're also hearing a lot about, you know, people who are cutting off their Trump supporting family because they've had enough, you know? Like, I think that there's an element of that we're already kind of seeing at play, where people are talking about how, you know, their parents voted for Trump and, you know, they don't want to go to Thanksgiving or whatever. I mean, for me personally, I've always been at odds with my family with regards to politics, and given what's happened to me this year, there's absolutely no way I'm doing holidays with them. But I can see how people are experiencing that through this election situation already right now. So there's that. And then at the bottoms of the decks, we have some more information. We have Knight of Cups, which is a great card to see in the aftermath of all of this, because it's talking about really being able to kind of fall back in love with your life again if you have been feeling a bit in despair around your situation. Like, I think you're going to be finding the fun a bit again, and you're going to be able to kind of capitalize a bit on this fire of inspiration and creativity that is available to you, especially as you finish out the processing of whatever shadow material has been dislodged for you to clear, as we have the frog in reverse coming up here. So it's like there's a bit of a wrapping up of some you know, like purification of the emotional body vibes going on. We also have Mary Magdalene Unconditional Love popping up here, which says love yourself, others, in every situation, no matter what the outward appearances may be. So again, it's like coming into a radical acceptance of where you're at, which is like half the battle of being able to move forward in a certain sense, because like so much of suffering comes from resistance to what is. And I think that a lot of people who have been maybe dealing with a lot of copium in the aftermath of the election, where they're trying to like convince themselves that Kamala has a secret plan to defeat Trump after she already lost. I think that some people might be coming into greater acceptance around the finality of that potentially, and be then in a position to kind of move forward after like processing out the grief. Because again, like you know, I think what a lot of people are going through right now are the stages of grief. And for people who, you know, are still in denial, it's like we have to get into, you know, it's like, what is it? Denial, bargaining, anger, acceptance, or something like that. I think that some people have been in the divine rage. Some people have been in the denial / bargaining. But I think that by the end of this lunation cycle, we're going to be seeing a lot more people coming into acceptance. And then it's going to be really about keeping the faith, because we have faith in the process here. So that's very in line with that star reverse. It's kind of more like the star upright, where it's like we're just going to keep the faith that even though it looks really dire, that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And then interestingly, we have full moon pop up again as a card here, where it's just like, yeah, we know the full moon vibes are going to be vibing throughout the rest of this whole waning moon cycle. So definitely a great time to, like I would say, work with the element of fire to keep that spark alive. So like candle magic, or like having a ritual burning a ghee lamp every day, or like offering something symbolically to a fire, you know, like this could be a great time where you like write down the things that you want to kind of like cut the cord with, either relationships or, you know, certain things in your own field, shadow material, and then like you can burn that in a little cauldron or whatever, you know, the paper. Any kind of thing like that involving fire is very supported, as well as like cord cutting stuff. Like I don't always recommend cord cutting, because like I think on a quantum level we're all connected regardless of cords, but that can sometimes be helpful for people who are looking to move on from a certain situation. Yeah, just shadow work in order to like sharpen your discernment to know what information to take in and what to reject is going to be key as well. Because full moon will be bringing a lot of things to light, in my opinion. And then lastly, we have an interesting archetype at the bottom of the deck here. We have Father, which for me is very interesting to see pop up here. The light attributes for this are talent for creating and supporting life, positive guiding light within a tribal unit. Interesting they mentioned the tribal unit, because we were just talking about the Maori and the Haka and everything. And then the shadow is dictatorial control, abusive authority. So I think that we're going to be really needing to see here very clearly, like, what is the divine masculine and what is not the divine masculine. You know, I think we're going to be seeing like there's just a lot going on with this right now in terms of, you know, our relationship to patriarchy and these systems of control, and how can we come into a healthy relationship with that energy in the current context. I think that there's definitely going to be a need for forgiveness, you know, forgiving people for they know not what they do. But that doesn't mean that you forget. It doesn't mean that you ignore what's going on. It just kind of means like, okay, we have to accept that a lot of people just are not on the consciousness level that we need them to be to not be in the situation right now. You know, we can't really help that. But anyway, thank you all for being here for this reading. If this resonated with you, I offer private sessions, mythicarts.com/levelup. Also, now boarding Earth Guardian Quest, my 4-month container taking Earth Guardians through the final months of Saturn and Aquarius, as per Vedic astrology. And signups are going to be open all the way through December 13th, but it starts December 1st. So get on in there, mythicarts.com/quest. You can get all the information that you need there. And I'm going to be posting a lot more as well as I ramp up my creation around that right now. And my stream schedule this month is going to be Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Please like, share, subscribe. I'm trying to grow my channel, even though I lost momentum a little bit there. I'm hoping to continue to regain the momentum and continue on my journey of content creation. So all support is welcome. Thank you so much. And until next time, may your heart lead on the path of destiny, and I'll see you in the next one.